Hey everyone, welcome to MarketBeat Mondays. We're so glad that you joined us today for a look back at some of the big movers last week and a look ahead mostly this week to some of the biggest market moving action coming up this week, some stocks to watch, and we want to hear what stocks you want to know about too. Thanks to everyone joining us for this live stream. We're trying it new on MarketBeat every Monday right at market close, going through some of the hot things to watch this week. And we also just want to hear from you in the comments. So let us know if you're watching. Let us know which stocks you're watching this week, and you might want our analyst Chris Markoch and Thomas Hughes to go over. We'll dive into as many of your questions as we can this week too. But first, let's get our guys on. So great to have you back with us, Chris and Thomas. We love having you here on these Mondays. Let's talk about the hottest topic of the day, and that is the China-U.S. tariff talks back in action in London this week. That's kind of the biggest market-moving news, but so far, Thomas, it really hasn't moved the market.
Well, right. It's great news. It's awesome that they're talking. We're hoping that some good news will come out of it. But as a market moving event, right now there's no news because they're still talking. We don't know if they're going to make an agreement, they're going to reach an accord, they're going to set a standard, or if the talks will deteriorate. So like this news could come out tomorrow, the market could shoot higher, or it could sell off real hard. It just depends on how the talks progress.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Thomas. The talks, at least from what I knew about an hour ago, the talks seemed like they were still going on. So that means they've been talking for quite a while today. I'm not expecting that there's going to be an announcement today or tomorrow of an agreement, but I think if we get to the point where we say there's clearly a framework for an agreement and that the two sides are agreeing to keep talking, I think that's going to be good and probably enough to alleviate the market concerns.
Yeah, really good point. And like you said, I don't think we've seen any real traction happening yet with these discussions, but there is potential to have some market moves. So I just want to have you, this might be a little bit more speculative discussion here, but just talking about what could happen in these talks this week that might move the market one way or another. Are we actually expecting to have some kind of decision made this week? Is this just ongoing, so it's a positive sign? Just kind of what are some potentials, things to watch out for in the market because of these discussions?
Well, I want to say I think that the negotiations, the talks have progressed more quickly than they did the last time. I think it took several quarters for the two sides to come to the table under the first Trump administration, and it seems like now they've reached that point only within a few months of the tariffs being announced. As far as what to expect, I think that it's unlikely we're going to get China to cave in on like a lot of major things. I think the best case scenario would be to have what happened in the first administration, where they just kind of agree to disagree on a lot of things, but come to an accord where there are some tariffs on some things, restrictions on some other things are reduced, and we get a new normalcy, which I think could be really great for the market, because right now we're operating at maximum uncertainty. It could go either way. So what we really need is any amount of certainty, and even with a tariff in place deal, some certainty would be a really big market mover.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been such a movement in the market with these tariff discussions, not just now, but really for a very long time. And so I think everyone is ready to see these tariff discussions end and come to a true resolution where there isn't that wait to see what happens when this 90-day pause is up and what changes we could expect. So excited for this to be over, but keep an eye on that this week for any changes that might come. Let's move on to the next topic. And Chris, I think this is a good one for you to take. Talking about the S&P 500, no changes, even though some people were expecting some changes this week.
Yeah, specifically, Robinhood shareholders were expecting a change this week, and they didn't get one, and the stock pulled back. At one point, it was down over 5% today, but it started coming back here at the close, and it cut about half of that off. So it's closed today down about 2.3%. Not surprising. The stock was on a heater going into last Friday because so many people thought that Hood was going to get included. There was no reason, based on the qualifications necessary by the S&P 500, there was no reason why Hood couldn't have been included. But for whatever reason, the S&P 500 decided they were going to pass on it for now. In fact, they didn't rebalance the index at all. They just left it the same. So Hood got snubbed, but so did some other stocks. as far as, whether it's a buy point, I noticed there was some, I just noticed on the fintech social platforms, there was some interest. Obviously, some people were interested in buying it today. Others were saying, hold off. I just wrote an article today. I think there's a correlation here between, you see a correlation between what's happening with Hood after this, and you saw it with Palantir, you saw it with Coinbase, where the stock dips because there's disappointment after this announcement. You could even see some other correlations with Palantir in terms of the retail interest and the concerns about the stock's valuation. And I think there's a larger correlation going on with crypto than some investors might want to acknowledge. But I think right now, if Hood were to pull back to a buyable range, I think that's a great entry point for some investors. Would I chase it where it's at now? I probably wouldn't, but I think the chart is saying something else, and I know Thomas wanted to jump in there.
Well, right. Not to discount Chris's opinion about this and the position of this market, but looking at the chart, even with today's pullback, it still looks pretty bullish to me.
Yeah.
I will say this with a caveat because we're looking at the weekly chart, and today's candle, this week's candle, is only 1 day old. We have 4 more days this week, so the market could still reverse course and sell off. But that being said, this very first day, the pull-off was met by buyers. Buyers are showing support above the midpoint of last week's candle, which was a very strong bullish candle breaking to new highs. So what I'm seeing right now is a Harami pattern. If the market holds these levels and confirms this pattern by the end of the week, that would be a bullish signal to me. It would signal a continuation of the trend. We may see some consolidation, some sideways movement, but I would expect to see this market continue to move higher this year.
Yeah, interesting. John wants to know, thanks for joining us, John. He wants to know if you think any of the news on Robinhood will also have an impact on SoFi. I know, Thomas, we've talked about SoFi a couple of times before. Do you see an impact here?
Not really. Not really.
Yeah, not much the same. Okay, well, we're going to get to some of your questions, guys. Thanks for adding some of the stocks you're interested in. We had a couple more topics, news of the day that are of the week that we wanted to get to. And another one of those is Apple. There's a big Apple conference going on right now, but it doesn't seem to be doing much. Chris, what can you tell us about that?
No, it's not doing much, and that's because Apple had a low bar to clear. They probably cleared that bar, but they didn't do what a lot of investors want it to do in terms of there's really not a lot coming out about AI and their plans for AI. They've talked about liquid glass, talked about some operating system nomenclatures and how they're going to do that, and what's going to be different in the new operating systems. But they didn't, so far, at least from what I've heard, they haven't announced anything show-stopping that's going to move the stock significantly. And in fact, I think the stock was dropping into the close. They're just in a holding pattern right now. There's just not a lot coming out of Cupertino that's getting a lot of investors excited. And when you compare that to a stock that's trading at around 28 times earnings, they need something to juice the stock, and investors just aren't getting it right now.
Right. To elaborate on what Chris is saying, I'm looking at some headlines, and right ahead of the conference, Wedbush, who covers tech pretty heavily, Apple very specifically, it was expecting Apple to announce some news about its AI monetization phase, and I don't think we got really any of that from the conference.
No.
Yeah, not a lot coming out of this yet. I think there's still more ongoing this week, but we'll see if it has any major moves on Apple or not. So far, this stock hasn't done a lot.
The one caveat I would make, Bridget, is I agree with you. There's still time in the conference. I think what you're going to want to watch for is what happens with the developers. So this is the developers conference. What does Apple say in terms of the developers, and how do the developers receive that? There might be a story there, but again, that's not something we're hearing about today.
Yeah, it didn't happen today. The stock has not got traction. Valuation is high, not a lot of interest, not a lot of catalysts. So I don't really see this one regaining much traction this year. Of course, they could announce something any day, any time, make some kind of a advancement. But until they do, I think that Apple will not be a market leader.
Yep.
All right, guys, let's move into some of our viewer questions. I'm going to start with the first stock, and that was somebody who looked at the preview and told us what they wanted to hear about early on, and that is Intel. So we're going to have you guys dive into Intel, but I want to get you ready on some of the other stocks our viewers are asking about. And that one is VGT. So Chris, if you want to look that up, Thomas, I'll have you start talking about Intel. What's going on with this company? That stock price hasn't seemed to recover too much since that April drop.
Well, right. Intel is certainly struggling. It's lost some relevancy in the semiconductor world. Its business isn't really failing, but they're not making great strides. They're not commanding the AI market. They're not protecting their market share with CPUs. So they have a lot of headwinds. The last CEO kind of got them on a couple of different pathways that we thought were going to pay off, but ended up being dead weight and baggage for the company. Now it's just working its way through some of that, trying to reestablish a foothold for growth. I see that potentially happening over the next year, but I think until we start seeing it in the results, the stock price will probably continue to struggle.
Yeah, that's a pretty good analysis of what's going on in this one. I think it's a good conversation really quick about just overall the chip companies in general. I think in most of them have seen quite the recovery since April, since the tariff news kind of crashed the whole market, especially hit those tech sectors hard. Most chip stocks have seen a significant recovery. Why do you think Intel is so far behind? It didn't recover like the rest of the companies in the sector.
Well, right. It's just struggling in today's market. It doesn't have a really strong growth segment. It's not growing strongly with GPUs or with CPUs or with PCs. So it's just struggling. And there are other semiconductor stocks that are doing those things that are better choices. Micron's getting traction with memory. AMD's getting traction across its stack. It's got AI. It's got PCs and embedded and industrial. NVIDIA obviously has its own traction. So Intel is just kind of sitting up there by its side, struggling with its size, struggling with its position in the market, struggling to regain a footing for growth. So like until that happens, it's just going to be sitting by the wayside at stock price, lagging the market.
All right. Thank you, Thomas. Thomas, I want the next one for you to look up. TC is joining us. TC, thanks for being here. He wants to hear about ASTS. So, Thomas, you can look up that one. Take some time to just read through that one a little bit. And Chris, let's move on to you with VGT. Tell me about this one.
So this is the Vanguard Information Technology ETF. So this has just turned positive for the year. It took a really big nosedive along with a lot of the technology stocks, as you would expect earlier in the year, but it's bounced back nicely and it's starting to approach its 52-week high around 645. The question is whether or not it's going to get there right now. And the answer is, I don't know, because its largest holding is Apple right now. And so Apple may weigh that down a little bit, but if you're looking at it from the standpoint of a long-term investor, and I think that's what most people do with this fund, it's a really good choice. Expense ratio is very low. It's only like 0.1% is the expense ratio. It gives you a really broad diversification between large, mid, and small caps. It gives you diversification throughout all the sectors of information technology. We're talking about hardware. We're talking about software. We're talking about semis. So good fund. I think it's done a lot of what you would expect to see from technology stocks, and I think it could make a push up to that 52-week high. But again, investors might get a little bit of a pullback right now because its largest holding as of right now is Apple.
Yeah, that's a solid point and goes into what we were just talking about earlier, that there's just not a lot of movement happening in Apple, so it's going to weigh down an ETF like this. Good question from our viewers, and good answer, Chris. Thank you for that. Okay, Thomas, let's move on to ASTS. What do you have for that one?
Well, ASTS is interesting. This is a company who's building a space-based network for mobile cellular connection. Kind of reminds me of Starlink, but not for internet, for mobile cell phones. Quick look at the headlines. It looks like they're gaining traction with contract wins, and there is some interest from Amazon and Jeff Bezos. There's some speculation that Amazon is going to be really investing heavily in this company and helping them expand their network. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, a space-based mobile network sounds awesome because then you would have coverage everywhere you went. No roaming. I think, no coverage overlaps. I mean, it's just everywhere you go. That's awesome. So I like this one.
I remember that one took off really sharply earlier this year. I'm trying to remember what the catalyst for that was, but I remember that ASTS, it really shot up this year.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. There was quite a bit. It actually, the biggest peak it saw was between August and September of last year. And I think that's when we talked about it on this channel for maybe the first time. And then it had another big peak in February, March time, went down with the market like normal, but now it's back up above where it was in March, which is interesting to see.
So it looks like last year in the first quarter was when it started to make money, make revenue, right? And so revenue went from 0 to 500K. It has been pretty, steady, stable, strong since then. Yeah. And it looks like now the market is expecting revenue to really start accelerating and growing. Let's see, what have we got here? Oh my gosh. Yeah, right on. So we're looking at hyper growth for the next 4 to 5 years, 1,000% growth this year, high triple digits the next 3 to 4 years, with a really eye-opening forecast for earnings. This year we're looking at negative 85 cents per share, but just within 4, 5, not even 5 years, we're looking at over $20 a share. So the P&E is going to be about, the price to earnings multiple for this company for 2030 based on the forward outlook is 1 times earnings. I mean, that's ridiculously low. If anything, right, and the upcoming news or the reporting cycle affirms this outlook for revenue and for earnings growth, this stock is going to rocket higher.
That's a really good outlook on this one. And it, like you said, it's a really intriguing concept that I think has a lot of commercialization, a lot of people very interested in this concept. Right. So as long as they can make it happen and get it out there and make it actually actionable, I think they're going to be successful. So that forward growth is a really good thing to look at with this company. Anything particular about why it's popping so much higher this week? I think that's one hesitation some investors might have, is wanting to buy when it's on this upward trend like it is just right now. It popped quite a bit this week.
Right. It's because of this chatter about Amazon. Let me double check this headline again. It looks like it came out late last week, where some social media post raised speculation that Jeff Bezos and Amazon were going to be intensifying their role and their investment in this company.
Yeah, and that's some big news for this company. That's enough to give it that little boost like it's got. So a good one to keep an eye on. I think we should do another video on this one soon because, like we said, we've talked about it before, but it's still a lot of growth potential ahead for this one. So still the early stages, it feels like.
Well, right. Yeah. So I know that the editorial staff is watching our video right now. They can rest assured that I will be pitching this for an article. They should expect it to come.
Yeah.
Love it. Thank you, guys. And I love hearing these suggestions from viewers of what you're interested in, because it also gives us a good idea for what to look at right now. So thank you guys for all of these suggestions that are coming. We're going to move on to some other ones here. I'm just going through the list. There's quite a few that people have coming in. We love to see this. We've done WFC. eHelp wants to know about WFC. Thanks for tuning in, eHelp. If somebody wants to look up that one really quick, let me know if you got that one coming. And then another one is ARM. So we'll have you look at both of those real quick. So give us some time to look up some of these charts. There's a lot to look into and discuss to give a real analysis of what's going on with these companies.
Right. I haven't looked up Wells Fargo real recently, but generally speaking, the banks have been doing well. It reported fairly well, I think, at the last report. I see that... oh, look, the Federal Reserve has lifted their asset cap. That's good news for them.
That's correlating with with some bullish upgrades that I'm seeing on it too.
Yeah, that's just bullish news for the bank. It just means that it's in better financial health than it's been in a long time. The Fed is going to let it start growing again. banks in general have a pretty good valuation. Wells is trading about 13 times earning. That's nice and cheap. Dividend yield is pretty attractive, very reliable and stable. Correlating that back to the asset cap lifting, if the company can now grow again or focus on growth again, then we can expect it to start growing revenue, growing earnings, and also accelerating its capital return growth. And capital return growth is what really will drive the stock price higher over time.
Thomas or Chris, anything else that you want to say about Wells Fargo?
No, I think we've covered that pretty well.
Covered Wells Fargo. Okay, well, let's move on to ARM a little bit. If you've had time to look up this chart, I'll pull up the chart right away just to take a look at it with everybody while we're looking here. It's got a little bit of a boost coming this week. Not a huge jump, though, at least not close to its all-time highs that it was seen earlier in the year. What do you guys know about this company, or have you covered it before?
Yeah, I've covered it briefly. I mean, it's essentially that companies like NVIDIA and Qualcomm and Apple, they need ARM's architecture for their devices, for their AI chips. So they're kind of a picks and shovel play here,
right.
but they earn their revenue through licensing.
Right.
So they license their technology and they collect royalties from it, and that's attractive to some investors for that reason.
Right. Because in the semiconductor world, chips are usually ARM based or something else.
Right.
Oh, very interesting. Any thoughts on what's behind the little boost it's seen this week?
Let's see. CEOs, compute platforms, always.
This is a cold look at these stocks for these guys, just to remind us we're taking some time to look at it and see what's going on.
I don't see anything that's stands out, just generally positive news cycle, working on developing new markets, some support from the White House. I mean, they're growing. Q4 was 33%. We're looking at another pretty good, solid growth outlook, looking at double-digit growth being sustained through the middle of the next decade. Good profitability, profit growth. So I think all of those things are at play here.
All right, that's a good look at that one. Let's go to another one that's maybe a little bit more familiar, and it's one we talked about recently. I think this one was with Chris. Chris, we talked about NVTS in a video that came out on Sunday. Is that right? Is my memory?
What one? I'm sorry, Bridget?
NVTS. I believe that was one of the small caps.
Microvast.
Yes.
Microvast? Oh, MVST, I believe. Is
yes, NVTS. Yeah.
MVST, yeah, Microvast. Yeah, Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
This has been a great performing stock this year. It's all close to 100%. Lots of stories here. One of the things about this stock is that most of its revenue is coming internationally. This was something we talked about last week. So it's not necessarily getting involved in any of the tariff discussions or anything that's going on with the U.S. That's driving some growth here. The company's pivoted to being a profitable company. They're also which means they've got some free cash flow coming in. There's just a lot. They've got over 800 patents. So there's a story here, and what we were talking about specifically last week, Bridget, was they've had some analysts that gave it an upgrade, which again, this is a penny stock. A lot of these aren't covered very highly by analysts, but this one was covered, and it's getting some bullish sentiment from analysts. But I think I just brought up some catalysts now, and we talked about this before. This has some other catalysts going for it right now that make you understand why the analysts are excited about this. I think the stock has room to run right now.
Right. So I'm looking at the chart, and what the word Chris said, pivot, strikes a note with me. If you look at the chart, you can see that this market has made a pivot, and I think it's tied to what Chris also said, which is profit through free cash flow. You can see here that's in November, there was a huge volume spike, which really started the reversal and rebound. So what I see in the chart now is a rounded bottom that has actually confirmed and entered a reversal. Since that November price pop, the market's moved higher, struggled a little bit with resistance, moved down, confirmed support again at a cluster of moving averages, and it's now moving higher, setting multi-year highs. We got a potentially bullish flag pattern forming. So 2 to 4. I mean, this stock could be at $6 and then $8 again, probably within the next few months.
Yeah, that's a really interesting look at this. The consensus price targets on it are lower than that right now, but like you said, it's a new and quickly moving stock and company that those can change all the time. So that's an interesting look at that one. I do think that we actually had, so I'm glad we talked about it because again, Chris, you wrote about this one just last week, but the other ticker, it was actually a different company that he wants to hear about. So one of our viewers is looking at NVTS. This is Navitas Semiconductor. Navitas. I don't know if you have a chance to look at that one a little bit. I'll pull the chart up here right away. It's had quite a good spike. Really good spike, actually. It was down at around below $2 in the end of May, and it's now up around $7.30. What is going on with this one?
Hang on a sec.
Yeah, I'm taking a look at it myself.
Power semiconductors. Right. So this looks like industrial semiconductors for power control, power switching. So this is one that is more focused on consumer products, industrial products, things like solar inverters, laptops, mobile phones, anything where there's going to be power control needs. But that's an important market because with AI and the advancements of semiconductor technology in general, they require more and more power. So that we're going to need more and more advanced power controlling semiconductors to go along with them.
Right. And there was some specific news that came out late last week. The company was named. The company, I can't talk right now, Bridget. The company, NVIDIA, announced that it had selected the company to collaborate with it on developing chips to support NVIDIA's 800-volt high-voltage direct current data center infrastructure. There we go.
Yeah, that's a big announcement.
Well, that is because that kind of fits in with NVIDIA's announcement to open NV Fusion to NV Fusion Link. They're establishing an ecosystem of companies where you can use your NVIDIA GPUs with any CPU that you want to, but if you want to get the most performance out of it, you're going to need to focus on an NV Link Fusion CPU and now possibly Navitas, networking equipment and power control equipment to make it all work as best as it can.
Right. There is some concern that it's going to still be a while before these types of chips and this type are actually available and workable. So the stock might be getting a little bit ahead of itself, but I noticed right away on the chart there was something that happened that caused it to gap up like it did, and that was why.
Yeah. Speaking of getting a little bit ahead of itself, this is a stock we've talked about the last 3 weeks on MarketBeat Mondays, and that's Applied Digital. Let's get back to this stock again. I'm going to pull up that chart because it just keeps getting higher. I feel like every time we've talked about it, this stock has had a big boost, and it's happened again. I've got the chart up now, and the question we have from a viewer, this is a really great question. Thank you for asking that. I'm trying to look at the name to see who asked it, but I read it earlier. Is now a time to get in? I've got a few people interested in Applied Digital. It looks like Olivier. I'm not sure how to say your name. I'm sorry about that. But anyways, should you wait for a pullback on Applied Digital? It's a great question because the stock has had such a boost since the end of May. So it's just been basically a week and a half. It got all the way up to 15, now around 13 today. How much of a pullback would you wait for to get into this stock? Are we going to keep seeing a rise, or is it just, did it see that big boost simply because of the NVIDIA partnerships and announcements that kind of came out over the last week or so?
All right. It looks like a pullback has started now. It opened with a gain, but it sold off during the day and closed with a loss. It looks like there's resistance at last week's highs. In this scenario, the stock could just move sideways from here, but it looks like it could pull back all the way to about $11 or so. $11 is where it looks like the firm ceiling was over the past year and a half. That was just broken. Technically speaking, with last week's breakout, I would like to see the price pull back to that level, confirm it for support, and then begin rebounding, and that would be a signal to buy.
Right.
That's really good. Just to refresh viewers who maybe haven't heard of Applied Digital yet, this company is a data center company. It's had some big catalysts over the last few weeks. Can you go over some of those catalysts and why this one has some signs for strong future growth?
Well, right. It's expanding and accelerating its expansion of plans for building out data centers. It was a Bitcoin-focused business, but now it's building out a new data center campus right now, focused on AI and high-speed computing. It's one of the, maybe not only, but it's a leading source for third-party AI infrastructure built on NVIDIA GPUs. It's had, like I said, it's had several positive news catalysts recently. But what I'm looking at here, the catalyst today for this sell-off is that there was a downgrade. So it looks like analysts at Compass Point think that the market has made its run, and have downgraded from buy to neutral.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a difference for sure in what's happening, especially in these smaller companies like this. I hope we've fully answered your question on Applied Digital. Like you said, there's a bunch of movement in this stock over the last couple of weeks. It's interesting that it keeps coming up in the live stream as a question. It's something clearly people are interested in.
Yeah, just thinking about the way AI is moving and what the company is doing, I would expect to hear more positive news emerge as the weeks and quarters progress. But it is a small company, so there's only so much it can do at one time. You know, it's got to finish its one data center, and then it can move on to the next one. And so maybe there's some funding news that comes up, or some new client news that comes up. But you know, I would expect to hear some pretty positive news in the cycle.
Perfect. I've got a couple more fresh stocks to talk about. I love the questions coming in. Thanks again to everybody who's watching today. I am going to give you guys a couple of minutes to look up these other ones. We've got Orly, ORL, their stock split, wanting to ask about what to do with that one before the stock split comes in. Your advice, we'll go over the chart. And then another one, Amir wants to hear about CLF, especially after Trump put 50 tariff on steel. So good question. Chris, if you want to look into CLF, Thomas, I'm going to have you talk about Orly. Before we get to that, guys, I want to talk to you about, if you've watched our videos before, if you're a subscriber, thanks for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button. We'd love to have you stay with us for all of our videos. They come out every week. We post daily from Tuesday through Friday, and then again on Sunday afternoons for the weekend, so you have some fresh content to watch then too. And also, if you haven't heard of our texting program yet, I wanted to tell you about that. Our SMS service is pretty awesome. We really love this new service that we have. It's all about getting updates sent right to your phone. You can text YouTube to 68285 and get updates on all of these stocks. If you hear about a stock here today that you want to watch and see if a pullback is coming or if a big spike comes, you can get those alerts sent right to your phone by texting YouTube to 68285. All right, let's get back to the stock coverage now. Thomas, let's dive into Orly. What's going on there with that stock split?
So yeah, O'Reilly Auto Parts. There's a lot that I can say about this one. I like this stock, this company. It reminds me of AutoZone. They fit into my category of must-own stocks for long-term investors, similar to Cintas. It just has a really strong business, well-entrenched, blue-chip quality operations, producing organic, self-funded growth, sustainable growth, and lots of cash flow. Cash flow is really important because it repurchases shares significantly. We're reducing the count every year. You can see that in the stock price, which just trends higher and higher and higher. So talking about the stock split, we've talked about this a whole lot on this channel. Just touching base with the data from Bank of America, their data, their analysis has shown that stocks that split tend to outperform the market, because stocks that split do so because their share prices are going higher, and they're going higher and higher and higher and higher and higher because it's a really good company producing cash flow and buying back shares. So these two things kind of go hand in hand. The stock will split. There'll probably be some volatility. There could be a pretty strong pullback, but I would look at the chart of Cintas to reassure yourself that that pullback will result in a buying opportunity. Just wait for it to bottom. Start off with a small position, wait for it to confirm the bottom, buy some more. When it starts moving higher again, buy some more, and then just keep buying it all the time, every year, every quarter, reinvesting. And ride that money higher, 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 and higher, higher.
Yeah, Thomas, I think last week we talked about O'Reilly Auto Parts on the store on the show too, because there's a lot of catalysts for this one potentially anyway, because of tariffs impacting the auto market, auto prices getting higher. It just makes sense that this is a company that's going to continue to see high demand as the prices of vehicles get more expensive. Repairing them becomes more important. So it makes sense for a lot of economic reasons too.
Right, indeed.
All right, Chris, let's move on to CLF. What can you tell us about
Sure.
this company?
Okay, so this is Cleveland Cliffs, steel company, ticker symbol CLF, like they said. So here's the story. This is a company that's just, it's right in the bullseye of all the tariff talk that's going on right now. And what Cleveland Cliffs is a manufacturer of domestically produced steel that's produced here in the United States. So you can imagine that in the last week or so, the stock's gotten a little bit of a lift. Now, as recently as May 28th, it got a massive downgrade. It went, one analyst, let me see here who that was again. I just was looking at it. GLJ Research downgraded from a strong buy to a strong sell. That's not something that happens very often. But if investors remember, right on May 30th, a couple days later, was when Trump announced the steel tariffs, the higher steel tariffs, and that's going to impact the automotive business. But what it's going to encourage the automotive business to do is to source domestic steel, and that's what plays into Cleveland Cliffs' strength. So right now, what was a headwind for the stock has turned into a tailwind, but that's not really showing up a lot. The stock's up about 2.7% in the last 5 days. But this again, it's a tariff story right now, and we're just going to have to wait and see. As long as the tariffs are in their favor, Cleveland Cliffs looks like a good buy. But as we know, that could change very quickly, and but that's what's going on with the stock right now. So if you think the tariffs are going to stay in place on foreign steel, then Cleveland Cliffs looks like it would be a great play.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, I think we've got a few other stocks. I might have you guys look at a couple of the other ones that people have asked about. That's Nebius is one of them. And then people wanted to hear about qubits, the quantum stocks. So talking about D-Wave or qubits. Any thoughts on those stocks? So I know, Chris, you've talked about that before. I'll have you look those up really quick. And then if you have heard of, this is a new one for me. It just popped off the page for me. Nebius, Thomas.
I'm trying to find it right now.
As a potential to talk about. Yeah. I like hearing these new stock ideas too. Sometimes it's stuff maybe we covered a while ago, or maybe we haven't talked about it in a long time. But thanks for all of these suggestions of things that you want to hear about. That's what this is all about, is looking into the stocks that you're looking at this week. You've given us really good ideas over the past few weeks of doing these Market Beat Mondays. So thanks again for being here and for all your thoughts in the comments. All right, Thomas, let's get to you if you've had a chance. Actually, you know what, Thomas? Yeah. I'll give you some more time to look that one up. Chris, I know you know about D-Wave. You've talked about this one before. Why don't you take us away with that a little bit about these quantum stocks? Yeah, so quantum stocks they've been doing very well recently. D-Wave's had a little bit, I'm looking right now. They're one of the better performing ones. It's up about 113% year to date. It kind of chopped around here in the last week. It was up. It's kind of nudged its head above. I'm still trying to figure out why that is. Why, what's happened to the stock in the last, few days or so that it's. Yeah, there's been quite a bit of volatility in D-Wave. Just looking back to the last week, there's been a lot of volatility going from that $17, $18 range, popping down a couple of dollars and back up again. It's different from the trend that we've seen the last 3 months, where it's pretty much just upward for this stock. It's had a really strong last 6 months, really strong past year, really. But there is the volatility story with these quantum stocks. And I think some of it we've talked about before is when these kind of move up as a sector. So when one goes up, a lot of the quantum stocks kind of go up at the same time. So that's part of the story with these two, Chris. Anything else you found out about?
Yeah, I did. I'm sorry. I just found out. So on Friday, it announced that its new quantum computer, which is said to be capable of solving problems beyond the capabilities of a classic supercomputer. That's what we know that quantum does. It's now generally available in the market. Now, obviously, these things are quite expensive and they require specific environmental conditions, but the fact that it's got a product that's available in market means that the company is going to be generating revenue, and that's going to be important in terms of a path to profitability. One of the things that we've talked about before with these quantum stocks is right now a big key for a lot of these companies is which companies can get products to the market faster.
Right.
Because that's going to be a big determinant. D-Wave's already got products in the market; they're already earning revenue. This is going to help that, and I think that's why the stock's going higher right now.
Yeah, and it's still listed as a buy from analysts, although the consensus price target is quite a bit lower from where it trades today. But it has a strong future, like you said. Quantum stocks are interesting. Let us know what you guys think about quantum stocks in the comments. We've got more questions coming in, but we're kind of approaching the end of our show, guys. So thanks for being here. We're going to cover just a couple more and then wrap up of some things to look ahead this week. Thomas, why don't we get to this last little ringer? This is a company I've not heard about before. What have you learned so far?
Nebius, I like it. The chart looks good. The news stories look good. But basically, this is an AI infrastructure, kind of similar to Applied Digital. They're building full stack AI infrastructure. They're expanding into the UK to help them build infrastructure. They did just take on a fair amount of debt, but the balance sheet is very strong. They have $1 billion now of funding to help them with their growth plans. Outlook for revenue and earnings is pretty substantial. We're looking at double-digit growth right now. Right. And then double-digit growth accelerating into hyper growth pace the next couple of years, triple digits. Chart looks awesome. The chart looks awesome. We got a nice strong bottom. Volume is increasing. Today's action took us above our critical resistance point. Looks like a reversalism play, I would say. So 20 to 50 is the range. So another $30 move is possible, up to 80, retesting the recent highs. So yeah, I like this one.
Yeah, this is very interesting stock story. Quite a bit of volatility and movement in it. But do you see a strong future? Again, I think this industry, that data center industry, the AI industry, anything in that seems to have a lot of catalysts for the future. Or is this just one of many names?
I think that there's plenty of room for this industry to grow. AI is only in its earliest phases. We really have yet to establish a real strong second wave, the application wave.
Mm-hmm.
So once all the models are built and the companies have started to apply the models, they're all going to need compute space, compute power to store their data, to analyze and utilize their data for their consumers and their customers to come and use their services. And that's where companies like this come into play. This is a long-term play on AI, on technology. I would expect to see them making money long into the future.
All right, good analysis. Well, that's all the time we have for the individual stock stories. I'm going to wrap up today kind of like we normally do, and that's just looking at some of the big catalysts ahead, especially economic data that might be coming out this week. I know we have the consumer data coming out on Friday. Anything we want to say about there, guys, about what you're watching as some of those economic announcements this week that maybe could move the market one way or another?
Right. CPI and PPI is the story this week. CPI comes out, I think, Wednesday, PPI Thursday. Right. Both are projected to start showing a slight tick up in inflation, which would be probably pretty predictable. But you know, at the same time, energy prices have been going down, and the price of oil has remained muted. So we might still see the number come in flattish, and that would probably be considered bullish right now. I don't think the number is going to be going down. But I think if it comes in flattish, that's probably about the same thing for the markets.
Well, right. This is the CPI for last month.
Correct.
I think that there is a high probability for a downside surprise.
Okay.
I mean, flat, possibly a contraction. Like you said, oil prices are down real low.
Right.
I mean, tariffs tariffs kicked in, but a lot of them didn't kick in until just a week or so ago, right?
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, some consumer impact, but I don't think that it's going to be that great. I mean, not yet. I mean,
Right.
that could happen. That's part of the uncertainty is waiting for these things to happen. We
Right.
think we're going to start seeing it this time. Maybe we won't. But next month, we certainly will have the impact of tariffs. And then the question is, did it actually raise inflation or not?
That's true.
Right.
All
But
some really good points.
with the uncertainty, you got to think it takes some time for these things to bleed through into the economy. Like Fed policy moves are like 12 months, 18 months for them to affect the economy. So, tariffs will affect it more quickly, but will it affect it like 100% immediately? And I don't think that's going to happen.
Right. I think the thing is that you got to look at, even if tariffs don't have an inflationary effect of moving inflation up, the problem right now is that it's not moving down.
Right.
So it's stuck right in that 2.3, 2.4 range, which is still higher than what the Fed says it wants. The Fed's determined to say it's going to get down to 2, and if it doesn't, then we're just going to keep having this feud between Trump and Powell about I want interest rates down, and Powell's going to say I'm not going to do it.
I don't think that they can make it be 2. I think that they'll make it. I think they can make it drop, and I think they can make it drop below 2 because they can't dial it down with precision and say go to 2. They'll dial it down, and then the economy will overcorrect, and so then we'll be below 2 for a while, and they'll think, oh my gosh, it's stagnant growth, and then they'll do something to spur growth, and hopefully we'll get it back above 2. But it took them a long time to do that before.
Yeah.
And it didn't really happen until we had the pandemic and all that stimulus spending, right? So I think Jerome Powell will be very, very happy if inflation stayed at like 2.2 for a long time.
I think so.
Yeah, really good inflation discussion, guys. It'll be exciting to see what that does to the numbers this week. And we will have to cover that next week. Join us again next week for MarketBeat Mondays. We'll be here at Market Close again next week on Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern. Thank you so much for everyone for joining us today. So appreciate all your comments and all the stock suggestions you had for us today. Thank you so much for watching. As always, happy investing.